Hi, welcome to the Caffeinated Librarian. My name is Amy.
I'm Simona. And what are we talking about today?
Well, we also have Lou today.
Yes, producer Lou.
Our wonderful producer, Lewis, is going to be on this podcast with us after we've pestered him. So say hello.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yay! Yeah, well, you get to listen to us silently every week or so. So we're going to be talking today about Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, also known as something Dodgson. I can't remember his first name right now.
Charles.
Charles, thank you. So, who read it for the first time this time?
This was my second time reading it.
Okay. I think
just to clarify, we are just talking about Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. We're not divulging into Through the Looking Glass.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it really it's funny because I didn't realize that Alice in Wonderland, the Disney film, was just stolen from everything he wrote.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, where's Tweedledum and Tweedledee, and and all of these things, and then I listened to the other ones, and I was like, okay, it's a compilation. It's a very short story. Good to know. So I think we can do whatever we want with the addendum that not all of us are as well read in the whole three. So it's Alice Through the Looking Glass, and then there was one more that I cannot remember the name of.
Yeah, I think I may have read Alice Through the Looking Glass as well, but I don't know if I ever read the third one.
Because we can't remember the name of it. It made a big impression.
I have never actually read Alice Through the Needle's Eye. So.
Oh, thank you. That's it. Yeah, I listened to them all. I don't think I've ever physically read them, which I think is my loss because I haven't seen all the illustrations, but I have seen, I imagine, most of them because they're famous, and the Mouse's Tail poem.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the book that I actually borrowed from my sister's library has the original illustrations, and then the illustrations, and I cannot remember the woman's name who illustrated them, but I actually preferred hers to the original.
Yeah, I felt personally that the drawings in the original are a little on the creepier side, but I do also have to say that the illustrator worked closely with Lewis Carroll, and so I think that that's probably closer to his vision.
Oh, I did not know that. Oh, that's good to know. Oh, well, it makes more sense now.
The creepiness makes more sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think that we have to discuss drug use at this
time. Yes. Yes, let's.
I don't know what particular substances he was using, but boy, oh boy, it seems like he was using them.
So I have a lot of thoughts about this. So there are several kind of schools of thought. One is that he was using opium, and the other is that doing other kind of psychedelics, like mushrooms, which mushrooms are kind of a big part. And or like acid or something like that.
Right. Well, that would make sense with some of the visions in the story.
Yeah. Personally, I don't necessarily, that's not the avenue of analysis that I subscribe to.
Cool.
But there really is, there's drugs are one of the more written about things,
right,
when it comes to Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And there's a lot of there are a lot of instances that you could say were fueled by, or had potentially fueled by, drugs.
right. Well, the opium smoking caterpillar and the mushrooms in the same like segment of the story would make that sensible. But I also I found in my research for, okay, massive plug here, I have we've done a pick your own path story that is releasing on August 12th.
Not a choose your own adventure.
Not by any means a choose your own adventure.
I'll cut that out.
No, that would be funny, but but we do have choose your own adventures, but this is not one because it is not published by the people that publish choose your own adventure. So it is a very, very important thing to note. But I read a lot about Charles Dodgson and the actual name of Lewis Carroll and the origins of the story. And one of the things that I learned about Dodgson was that he had migraines, and the Alice in Wonderland syndrome, which is an actual syndrome where
Yes, it is.
where people feel that their bodies are different shaped, or they're too small or too large for their environments, and that can happen as a result of traumatic brain injury or migraines. So I found that to be like an interesting thing, and I would totally, if I was writing about someplace called Wonderland, I would totally talk about that.
I just have a question regarding his alleged drug use. Was drugs taken for medicinal purposes? Because I know that at that time, doctors would prescribe drugs,
right,
laudanum and other sort of heavy drugs for certain ailments. So do we know if from anything in particular that would have caused him to rely on drugs?
Well, I mean, at that time, it was basically like, here's a like highly addictive drug, take that. And if you get addicted, we'll give you another highly addictive drug so that you can get off of that, which basically resulted in people being addicted to both.
Mm-hmm.
The 60s were a hell of a time, huh?
Yes. So yeah, definitely. That was probably prescribed as some sort of medication for like an ailment like migraines, or I don't know if there was anything else that was physically problematic for him. I know he had a stammer.
Okay.
But Lewis, do you know anything more about his physical condition?
I don't recall much about that.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the analysis that I wrote, like I said, I didn't really focus on the drug stuff so much, just because I didn't really find anything too tangible.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of other kind of analyses that can be described for what's happening within the book.
Right.
And the crazy thing about Alice in Wonderland is that there's so many symbols, but none of them really mean anything.
Right. And yeah, and scholars are always picking apart like what things are. And I know that they know, they think they know, because the story behind the story is that Alice asked for Charles Dodgson, Lewis Carroll. I'm just going to go with Lewis Carroll for the rest of this time because I can't say all that.
Yeah, Charles Dodgson does not roll off the tongue.
No,
I just
no.
even didn't say it right.
I totally see why he chose Lewis Carroll.
Yeah.
So, you know, they were on a boat ride, the three sisters, and I think their governess and Lewis Carroll, and Alice was bored and asked for a story. So he like placed them at the bank where they were taking the boat. And there's a well around there too, which, as something is mentioned at the bottom of the well that they think is that particular well. And so there are like places that they can attribute. And he says, what is it? Prima something and tertia, right? Look at the beginning of the book. That he's actually using the sisters. There were three sisters. It was Alice, Edith, and I can't remember. We're gonna Google. And their last name, I will just go ahead and just keep talking. Their last name was Little or Liddell. I think from the things I've listened to, it seems like it's Liddell or Little, but I say Liddell. So,
so her sister Lorena and Edith.
Yes. Yeah. So Lorena was the oldest, Edith was the youngest, and Alice was the middle. So,
right. And that's I think an important thing to go into Alice's Adventures in Wonderland with, is that the bottom line is that it was written for a child.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be a lot of I'm sure we're going to be discussing some uncomfortable points of analysis. But one of the things that I always kind of kept coming back to, and I remember it being a point in that horrible paper that I wrote, that at the end of the day, because Alice in Wonderland is so just out there,
mm-hmm.
and there are so many interpretations for the symbols, the bottom line, it is a story that was written for a child.
Right.
Now, why it was written for that child is probably what we'll discuss mostly.
Yeah, and also I like as a younger sister, I was never a middle child, but can you even imagine how they felt when Alice got a whole book and then a whole series, and then it got published, and then it was the most famous children's story in the world?
Man,
it must
they were probably like, we want a creepy guy writing about us.
Where's my creeper at? Yeah, no, definitely. It seems like that might have caused a lot of friction for her. And I do remember in my research, at one point she said, I don't want to be Alice in Wonderland anymore, when she was older. It must have been her whole life was kind of just taken by that.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, after Alice's Adventures in Wonderland was published, he lost contact with them, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, there was some sort of falling out.
Yeah.
And we don't know what happened, because I think some of his relatives kind of went through and razored out parts of his journal.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So there's never really going to be any resolution to that. Like, very different stories say that the mother thought that he was too close to Alice. Other stories say that she wanted him to marry the governess, who he actually, it sounds like he wrote the Red Queen, the Queen of Hearts, as the governess.
Right.
So he was not like by any means infatuated with her. And then yet another theory is that he wanted Lewis Carroll to marry Lorena because Alice was like the most saleable daughter. Like he wanted somebody rich for her.
That's parenting love right there.
I know, right? I know.
Yeah.
Well, apparently her nickname was that she was a kingfisher because she only wanted royalty for her kids.
Well, that makes sense to me because especially at that time, depending on your social status, marriage wasn't necessarily about love. And especially if you had daughters, your daughters of a certain class would not have been able to work. So I could also see it as you want to ensure the best future possible for your children. You know, argue it was sort of self-serving maybe on her part, but I kind of hesitate to form judgments on people in the past, especially since those were different times. And, you know, considering women of a certain class didn't have many options, you had to marry very well, you know, if you had any chance of surviving. And maybe one of her daughters was more, I guess, desirable, or like they felt that she had better prospects.
Right. Well, she was, I think, the most beautiful, but it's hard to tell. First of all, classical beauty is you know, changes throughout the centuries, and also, you know, the pictures that you get of people from that time, like nobody's smiling because it hurt your face to smile for too long. And you know, and it's in this weird color, and so everybody kind of looks a little odd. So I really wish I could find like a really good picture of her.
They may have some colorized ones. I know that there are some places where they've colorized old photographs. Might be able to find a colorized version because I saw a picture of her when she was 20, and she does look very attractive from what I'm able to gather from the photo.
But it's hard to tell again when you're in kind of like that resting face.
Yeah.
What features look like when you're making any other face. And I think that's really like my issue is that, you know, like she was apparently like so vibrant and exuberant, and like she was precocious and wild and fun and crazy, and that's probably why she was the star. And maybe like we don't know his feelings towards her, but you know, as the parent of a daughter, I'm gonna go out there and say I can't imagine anybody hanging out that much with my girl. But and times were different then, and I'm really not even gonna get into the nude photographs of children. Just not even gonna go there right now. But there, you know, but there are men that love children. There are totally men that love to hang out with children, and they can be teachers these days, but that was not an appropriate thing for them to do then. You know, so it's kind of hard. I feel like a jerk saying, you know, well, he wanted to hang out with little kids, especially girls. He was totally a creep. But I feel like the amount of evidence that we have does state that there was some sort of infatuation there.
I would say undoubtedly, yeah.
Yeah.
It could also be, and I'm not trying to make excuses for pedophiles, so I don't want to be misunderstood.
There we go.
We're going on the record. Not a fan.
No, I'm just putting it out there. But I also think because the little that I've read about him, his stutter was a major issue for him. And I think that prevented him from being very sociable. He also had, I think, physical issues as well. So I'm surprised if a part of him maybe was like not mentally stunted. I don't know if that's the term that I want to use, but if somehow he simply felt, because children to a certain age aren't as judgmental as adults are. I mean, obviously that changes as you get older. So could it also be that he also felt that with children, specifically maybe with Alice, because we don't know how the other sisters are. Maybe the other sisters were slightly more aloof. Maybe they were less outgoing, that he felt that he could connect to her on a certain level. And okay, maybe it might have eventually blossomed into romantic feelings. I mean, I don't know how long he was friends with the family before the family decided, that's enough. Like, did they stop talking when she was 15 years old?
Well, I think she was around 11 or 12 when they cut ties with him.
Okay.
And, and it just as an aside, not to cut you off, I'm just mid tangent, if you don't mind. Just really quickly, it's just funny that the mother wanted to marry him to Lorena, who was like 2 years older, but there's the thought that he asked for Alice's hand, and she was like, "Oh, too creepy."
And also maybe because I don't remember what year this was, but maybe it would have been an engagement, but obviously they would have consummated when whatever the coming of age was at that time. I don't know what age was considered appropriate at that time. Especially if she was,
let's say 25.
I think like 14, like you were marketable as a female.
Yeah, so especially if she was considering one of the older daughters, and it's not like the older daughter was 16 and you're desiring my 12-year-old. If the oldest one was 14,
right?
That's why I'm also thinking times were different. So when you would have considered marrying off your children, I'm sure even certain families, oh, here's my 4-year-old son, well, here's your infant daughter, let us join them, and when they get older they're going to get married.
Right.
It could have been one of those things, and maybe because he sort of refused, that's maybe what caused the split. Not necessarily that the mother may have had objections because here's this creeper man, going after my daughter, especially since she was considering offering the older one, which she wasn't much older. I don't know.
Right. It's just hard to know. It's like there's never going to be any definitive proof. Her great granddaughter or something said like, I do think he was in love with her. I don't think he ever acted on it because he was abstinent. He spoke many times in books about being abstinent and like using logic and math puzzles to kind of take his mind off the body. And his father was a priest or a reverend or something. I don't remember.
And Carol himself was a cleric.
Right. He couldn't be, up on stage because of his stammer or his stutter. I don't know. His speech impediment. We're going to go with that. But yeah, so like that is like heavy on my mind as like, was maybe he just wanted her for his daughter. It's very difficult. It's difficult for me to kind of paint with that brush without knowing him. I would be happy to paint with that brush with knowing him because like if we knew, it would make things easier.
Yeah, I understand. I can understand that. It's unfortunate. Like there will always be all these theories, but without any evidence, especially years after the fact. I mean, one could argue if anything had happened, there would have been that shame factor. But yeah. But going back to what Lewis said about the story being written by a child, and people find symbols. Sense of things, that was one of the issues I had, because as I was reading it, I was thinking to myself, am I meant to read into every single word that I'm reading, or am I just supposed to take it at it's quirky because it's quirky, there's no underlying message? That was one of the issues I had, and I think that's one of the reasons why I didn't like the book the first time I read it.
Ambiguity.
Yeah, it's so out there. Like, this is definitely a world I would never want to go in. Like, if the door, like Alice in Wonderland or Westeros, I'll choose Westeros. Like, I am not going to go into like Wonderland, because at least Westeros has some logic and rules to it.
I would choose Westeros only if I were somebody in power.
Right. Yeah. If you remained firmly in control of where your head was at all times.
Yeah.
If I were one of the dragons, I would choose Westeros, but I'm not to,
Wonderland. Being a dragon in Wonderland, though, either.
I would totally choose Wonderland because I would probably have died like halfway through the first season. I have much better odds in Wonderland. Especially since the king pardoned everyone, which actually I did find an interesting point, that the queen would sentence everyone to lose their heads and the king would just go by and be like, go away.
I was wondering if she was, I mean, you said that there's probably that she may have been based off the governess. I was wondering if the Red Queen was based on Bloody Mary, the first sister, because she had an entire purge of the Protestants and, burning people who didn't convert. So I was kind of curious if that's what he based her on. I could be wrong. I was just really curious.
I have, like, if you want to say I have negative knowledge of when things happened in history, you would be correct. So, like, those things, if they're connected, like, by times, that's a really good theory. But I would not know.
Yeah, because I was really curious, because there were definite moments, like when I think about the caucus race, I really thought that was a critique of politics. And then when I read something else, I was like, oh, okay, I'm not too far off, because that person interpreted it in the same way. Because, like with a lot of politicians, they run around in circles, but nothing is ever accomplished.
Yeah.
So that's how I kind of interpreted that. It's almost like we're going to run a race. What's the end goal? Who knows? At the end, we'll decide, who gets, as well, everyone should, for participating. So I was kind of curious if that was a critique of the political system at that time, although I have no knowledge of what the political system was at that time, like how things were. But it really reminded me of Dickens, because Dickens would critique the educational system in his stories, but do it in very funny ways. So I was really curious if that's what Lewis Carroll was doing with the whole caucus race.
That's a good question. Like, I have trouble with author intent in general. I feel like the author just came up with a good story, and then people that read it attributed stuff. I feel like most people, and this is just my opinion, like, I can't think that deeply about stuff. So, like, how would you consciously make a story with that many layers?
Right. So that's kind of what I was. That's one of the things that I kept going back to when I wrote that paper.
Yeah.
Like, did this guy Lewis Carroll? Did he really care? Was he really trying to make this book as deep as people are analyzing it to be?
Right.
I mean, probably not, because there are, the caucus thing. People say that's representative of adult life. Like, Alice doesn't understand what they're talking about.
Right.
So those are, because I guess you would say the theme of the book is a loss of innocence, childhood losing her innocence and stuff like that, which is why I think a lot of the sexual undertones are really brought out.
Right.
Especially
could you go further into that, because
that creepy caterpillar.
See, would you mind, Lewis, like talking a little bit more about that? Because I honestly missed it. I did not see any sexual undertones, and I don't know whether that makes me very naive or just clueless. So if you wouldn't mind just like saying like where you noticed some of those things.
Well, so
Now.
I guess the biggest thing is the caterpillar
And the mushrooms.
and the mushrooms. So
Okay.
she needs to, in order to control her growth and stuff like that, she almost needs to like I don't know what's the right word, but tame the caterpillar.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the right word for that? So
Well,
there's
she
a lot of
definitely needs to decipher. You know, he's not giving her any clear thoughts, and and unfortunately, I can't remember. I read like a pretty good analysis of the sexual undertones in that scene. So
yeah,
now
because
we Google.
because she finds herself kind of in this uncomfortable situation, and I think the mushrooms are supposed to symbolize her puberty and um, her becoming a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And the caterpillar has a very phallic shape to it.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, I wish I could be more articulate about it, but this is uncomfortable.
It is super uncomfortable. It is really, I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Well, I am looking at an article from Culture, and it definitely this article addresses the hidden messages, a lot of talk of Victorian prudity,
Mm-hmm.
prudery, sorry, which definitely at that time was very much so. Sexuality was rarely discussed. Puberty, I'm sure, was never discussed. Birth, I guess it just happened. No one really discussed these things. I'm just looking through the article.
Yeah, well, definitely. Here's a quote where, and also I do now. I kind of remember the scene better now that I looked into that part a little bit more. But the caterpillar is a jerk.
Yes.
Like the caterpillar, like if there's something to take incorrectly, he's taking that incorrectly. And that's a fascinating thing, just the dynamic there. And then the caterpillar leaves when she insults his size, which
Right.
uh, and but she says about talking about changing her size. Um, that she would find it very confusing. "It isn't," said the caterpillar. "Well, perhaps you haven't found it so yet," said Alice. "But when you have to turn into a chrysalis, you will someday, you know. And then after that a butterfly, I should think you'd find it a bit queer, wouldn't you?" So, I think that's talking about the bodily transformations.
Hmm. No, I see now. I see now what you mean. Yeah, I definitely didn't read it like that, and I guess a part of me was just my frustration in general with the text. So, but after listening to the two of you discuss it, I understand now what you're referencing and how it can be interpreted in that way. It makes sense now.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the mushroom is another thing that people,
Mhm.
when they do talk about a drug analysis of it, she needs to take the mushroom in order to kind of get control of her body. So they kind of, people that analyze it in that sense are looking at it in terms of she's already maybe there was one interpretation where Wonderland is actually just she needs to take the mushrooms in order to get out of Wonderland and control herself.
Mhm.
And Wonderland, the one she's in, is actually just a representation of the real world.
Mhm. And also like you need a man to take care of you. And mushrooms are definitely phallic symbols. So could that mean, like, in, you know, now when you become a woman, you will need a man to take care of you. You will need a man to go through the world with.
Or it could also be because there are many moments where Alice is trying to be polite, but she eventually decides, well, that's not working.
Yes.
Have been Lewis Carroll telling little girls almost enjoy it while you can, because when you become an adult, the world will stifle you.
Mm-hmm.
The world will prevent you from voicing an opinion. So almost encouraging maybe little girls, like, enjoy it while you can, you know, voice your opinion while you can, because when you become older, you won't have as many opportunities.
Right.
Yeah, actually, that's a very,
that.
that's a very astute observation, because a lot of it is, you know, a lot of this story is Alice kind of growing through this situation, in some instances literally,
Right.
and a lot of what's going on around her is Lewis Carroll's own viewpoints on the world, and he kind of sees this young girl, you know, loves this young girl one way or another,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of already is nostalgic for the fact that he knows she's growing up, which
Right.
is why I think, you know, Through the Looking Glass was a little bit more on the darker side.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And you know, and that's, again, you know, and it's, and I will come on the record and say I don't like pedophiles either.
Good.
Okay, Amy and I have just put that disclaimer out. Okay.
The Caffeinated Librarians do not sponsor pedophiles.
But, you know, like, as, and you know, and it's interesting, like, I have to view kind of everything now that I used to read. And it, you know, there's this saying that, like, life is a spiral. So, like, you just visit the same things over and over again and just view them in a different light because of the situation you're in at that point. And so, like, looking at it as a parent, it's definitely, you know, yeah, that's a very true thing. You know, like, you're constantly watching them grow. Every day you're watching them grow and you're celebrating their growth, but you're also just, like, you know, you're looking at, like, how little, first of all, how little context they have for anything that's good or bad, you know. But, like, when things are bad, like, my daughter will just be like, "This is the worst day ever." It's like, "Oh boy, you're gonna be disappointed." Um, but, you know, just, and knowing that everything is, like, possibly the last time, you know, like, well, you never know when the last time you're gonna carry your child to bed, and you never know the last time they're gonna come crying to you because they hurt themselves. And so you're always kind of just bearing it, you know, just, like, you know, like, trying to treasure every moment, even in crazy, ridiculous times, because your time is limited.
I can definitely agree with that. And I could also see that as another possible interpretation of Alice's entire journey, and talking about Through the Looking Glass, which I know I've read, but I don't remember. But it's definitely a lot darker, as Lewis mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
It also might relate to the whole idea that at that time, because I know Amy mentioned you knew photographs of children, and I
Mm-hmm.
was reading.
Oh my goodness. Sorry.
No, that's okay. And I recall reading that children were seen as pure, I think, devoid of sin, and just angelic. And obviously, you know, once you got older, that innocence sort of went away. You know, you no longer could hold on to it anymore.
Right.
And I you know, again, you could sort of see Lewis's response to the Wonderland through the looking glasses, realizing, that as Alice was getting older, as any child gets older, you lose that innocence because the world's realities sort of come crashing down on you. And there are certain things you can no longer fall back on. You may have to eventually leave your parents' home. You probably will no longer have a support system, and you have to face the world and all its realities on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't growing up suck?
It does. It's so bad.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I part of it is a part of it. I guess it also depends on how you look at things. I'm making it sound really depressing right now, but
You are.
Well, I have a story. And it's like one of my favorite stories for like when the scales fall from your eyes, like when like Ellie has my daughter has like these goodnight moon bunnies that are loveys that she's had like since she was like she's had one since she was born, and and it's been her comfort object, and it's it was very important when she was young. It was like it went everywhere with her. And one day we were at Kohl's and we saw a whole wall of her lovey. And she freaked out and started trying to rescue them all from the wall.
Mm.
And, and it was like so cute. And it was also so horrifying. Because it's like, well, like what you thought was unique in yours, they're everywhere.
And how long did it take her to like calm down? Do you remember? Or
Oh, well, she was hysterical. We said we'd buy one, but I remember her just wailing and trying to rip these things off the display wall because it was, and just what kind of crisis is that when you thought it was just yours?
Yeah, it's interesting how children interpret things. Some adults probably interpret that in the same way. I wouldn't put it past any adult probably to also watch That's Mine. But yeah, it's amazing how you interpret the world as a child. But I wanted to, if we could, Amy, you brought up that about author intent.
Right.
And it is true that I think sometimes we can overread a text. It reminds me of Tolkien when he was asked about the Rings and whether it was an allegory for World War One. I remember him saying that he didn't believe in allegories, or he didn't write the book with the intention that this is what you'll pull from it. But when you do analyze the text, you realize that certain moments were based, or what's the word I'm looking for? Well, I'll just go based on actual events in his life, because he fought in World War One. He lost a lot of close friends in World War One, and I'm thinking back to the scene where they're going through the marshes in the first book, and there are all these bodies floating in the swamp.
Right.
And people were like, who read it say, well, is this based on the fact that he saw bodies as he was walking through the trenches?
Right.
Walking on the field, like, was he seeing all these bodies? One could argue like, oh no, you're just reading into it. But I think it's really hard for an author to write anything, no matter how the author may say, no, this is not what I intend.
Right. I mean,
no,
go ahead. Sorry.
No, and just basically not have it somehow colored by events in his or her life. And that's
exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think that there's no one who writes who writes well anyway that would be able to write something and be able to write of feelings and themes without having experienced them on some level or another. Like I think he probably wasn't thinking about it when he wrote it. He might have just been completely in this world and writing it, but he must, to have those ideas, he had, he might have had to experience it, like, or even seen stuff about it. Like, I don't think you can be absolutely free of society in your writing.
Yeah, I agree to that. Yeah, I was even thinking about the whole scene with the tea party.
I love that.
To this day, I have no clue about what is going on in that scene. But I remember reading something, because the Mad Hatter is a hatter. When he's presented before the king, he mentions, "That's my profession. I'm a hatter."
Right.
I remember reading somewhere that the chemicals that hatters used to dye their hats would literally drive them insane.
Yeah.
I don't remember what kind of chemicals they were using.
I know formaldehyde was one, I think.
Yeah, so basically how the hatter is mad because probably whatever he's using is making him kind of insane. I don't know about the March hare or the mouse. I can't find it for the two of them, but
March hare is about mating season. Like a hare in March.
Oh.
And dormice apparently were like pets, and children would keep them in teapots.
Gross.
Yeah, I know, right? Like that's really where I'd want to have my pet. But so those things like do make sort of sense. I love that, he had a falling out with time, and so now time. I think that's just a magnificent, like that time is mad. So, we're stuck there and we just have to have a million place settings because we're never going to have time not to have tea.
Yeah, and also all the cups are dirty. Do they ever wash those cups?
I can't imagine they do.
Well, so the Mad Hatter, one of the interpretations is that the Mad Hatter is kind of that awkward point between adolescence and adulthood, and none of us, I mean, are that far from that, where we can't remember what that was like. But like, I mean, I remember, just not washing dishes and, leaving the laundry until you really couldn't rewear that pair of underwear, So that's one of the interpretations of the Mad Hatter, just that that like the knowledge that you had as a child is no longer works as an adult, and so you have to kind of find a way to. And the Mad Hatter will never find a way. Like he's stuck in that perpetual limbo, which kind of sucks.
I know it is kind of sad, because now that you mention it, they are stuck in a limbo, because they do the same thing every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah, every single minute. They're kind of they can't leave.
Yeah.
Hold on again. I'm putting me on mute.
Okay. And I was just reading that the 10.6 that's on the Hatter's hat is the actual cost of a hat at that time, which was 10 shillings and 6 pence. And that would have been very pricey, I guess, for the average person to have.
Yeah. And again, so it's as a kid, you have no kind of sense of money or responsibility.
Yeah.
And so when you're just kind of getting into that adult realm, you just kind of spend money on frivolous things like a hat that nobody needs, or multiple magic sets,
or Pokemon, or
right. Yeah. You buy things because for the first time ever you have a little bit of money
and power.
Yeah.
Oh, and I just read that they actually used lead in the hat making process.
Oh, that would do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I made my hatter a lot cooler. I just have to say. I
No,
like
he definitely is, you know.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I actually found, I think Carol actually gave an answer for the riddle.
Oh.
Because I'm sorry, this riddle has always driven me insane. So he basically said there never was supposed to be an answer to the riddle. Being badgered by fans, put an answer in the preface of a later edition. The answer was because both produce a few notes, though they're very flat, and it is nevar, N-E-V-A-R, put with the wrong end in front.
Interesting.
See, even he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, he's just like,
because both produce a few notes, though they're very flat. Okay, and it's I'm reading too much into it, but I have an answer finally, so I'm like the happiest person ever. With the wrong end in front. Okay, well, people listening, if you, like me, always wondered what the answer to that ridiculous riddle was, you now have it. And you can all rest at ease as I can, because now I have my answer. All right, I feel
it made sense.
So I just gotta I want to geek out for 1 second before you close it down. One of my when I originally wrote this paper, it was in college and it was for a semiotics class, and semiotics is a study of the meaning of meaning.
Yes.
So like if you see a red rose and you want to say that symbolizes life, why does that symbolize life? That's what really the point of the class was. So this 42-page paper was about the meaning of meaning within Alice in Wonderland, and what finally ended up coming from it was that there was no meaning within Alice of Wonderland.
Yeah.
So I had to actually write another paper because the paper ended up not
inconclusive.
Yeah. So I had to end up doing American Beauty, which there's a lot of semiotic analysis within that movie.
For sure.
But the thing I really wanted to geek out about was that I'm actually Lost, the television show, is one of my top 3 favorite shows, and the 3rd season was heavily influenced by Alice's adventures in Wonderland, and more specifically Through the Looking Glass.
Interesting.
And the season 3 finale, both parts, are called Through the Looking Glass, and they are 2 of the best hours of television that has ever been produced. So
interesting. I have to watch this now. I have never watched Lost.
Yeah,
neither have I. I've never watched it.
It is, if you haven't watched it and you don't know anything about it, it is the ride of your life.
Cool.
It would be amazing, and I would love to come back and talk to you guys about Lost.
I was thinking we have to have another Lewis show with this. And I wanted to geek out for a second because I was reading to try and figure out what on earth to do with the Cheshire Cat. And I found that there are so many ideas on where and what the Cheshire Cat is supposed to be. And I feel like I need to share my geekdom on this because it is fascinating.
Please.
So a Cheshire Cat, there are some thoughts. So there were carvings in the town of Cheshire and thereabouts of cats with really big smiles. So that's one thought on where the Cheshire Cat came from. Another one is that there were 3. So there's the stone cats. There was that the cats are always smiling in Cheshire because they have so much milk and dairy because it was a big dairy producing town and like cheese and stuff like that. And the third one, which is definitely my favorite, is that there was a cheese that was made in the shape of a cat and it was eaten from tail to face. So the last thing that you would see would be the smile.
Nice. Cool.
That was definitely my favorite thing that I learned during my odyssey of Alice in Wonderland.
This was a cheese?
It was a cheese. And,
wow.
and I really mourned the lack of saved knowledge. When, because there's no picture of this cheese. Nobody took a picture of their cheese. There are no drawings of the cheese. All of this stuff is just rumored. And it really kind of brought to light we're always hearing, we're in the information age, and how true that is. How many things have been lost to time that could help describe all of the things that we read, all of the preserved publications that would really give light to what is behind those things.
See, now, Amy, you've got another thing on my mind that I have to think about. That's like
cheese.
Well, cheese is always something great to think about. I think
it's always on my mind.
cheese is wonderful. So. But yeah, and I wonder if there was a reason why you would eat the cheese in a certain way.
I don't know. I mean, that was another thing. Like, couldn't you eat it with the smile first? And again, no way to know. But I think we should all have grilled cheese now.
That would be nice. So it is now 1:00, folks.
Yes.
Amy, Lewis, and I want to thank you so much for listening to us. Really hope that you enjoyed this podcast and that you look forward to listening to many, many more that we're going to come out with. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you.
It's awesome. All right, bye now. Bye, everyone.
Bye.